Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, that's nice. We're here. Spring is a nice time of year, yes? Yes. Yeah, it is. Winter is too, but not as nice as spring. So, well, we're in Acts still. Do you realize we started Acts on January 1st this year? I know, it's been a long slog. Well, we still got a little ways to go. We have finished the three principal, what they call Paul's missionary journeys. I call them the Jesus tours 1, 2, and 3. We finished those, but we're still only 2/3 of the way through Acts, because from that point on, after he finishes those big tours, it gets dicey. So we're going to start the dicey section of the end of Acts today. But it starts with coming back to Jerusalem. Now, this picture right here it's actually a model. If you ever go to Israel, you will probably, most assuredly, your tour guide will take you to this place. There's a museum downtown in Jerusalem where they have a scale model made out of limestone of the city of Jerusalem from the first century. And in fact, I'll scan this across for you. You can tell if you look at the top of the screen, you'll see those giants walking up there. Those are people. So that's the size of this. And right in front of you is the Temple Mount area with the temple in the center of it and the large open area, the Gentiles and stuff like that. And then the periphery, if you look around the edge of the city right there, on the top there's the city wall. There's an old city wall which goes around Old Jerusalem. Much of it is still there today. But this is a pretty accurate representation of what it looked like during the time of Jesus and Paul when they came back to Jerusalem, just like this. By the way, there in the upper section, let's see, here's the right edge of the Temple Mount. See this four-pillared kind of thing right here? That's actually where the Roman soldiers used to live. And so it was a garrison right there, the Antonia Fortress. And the Roman soldiers would be right there with immediate access to the Temple Mount area in case crazy stuff happened. Because sometimes there would be millions of people in town, and there was people packed shoulder to shoulder in that area. So that was their control center. That'll be important in the story this morning, because they're gonna mobilize today, the guys that were in that Antonia Fortress. And by the way, see this red roof thing on the far right over there? Kind of a funny shaped thing. That's the Pool of Bethesda. So that's where the man was lying, and Jesus says, take up your bed and walk. It's right there. That is there archaeologically still today. So you can go and see that, and we know that that's exactly what it looked like because of the archaeology. So today in Israel, when you go to Jerusalem today, Jerusalem's city level, the modern level of the street and stuff like that, is still about 20 feet higher, 30 feet higher than what the level was back then. I mean, this over the centuries, things just build up. So when you look in at that particular pool in Bethesda, you go in there, it's actually sort of down. You have to look down to see it, but you can see the structure of it. It's actually pretty cool. So this is probably the most accurate depiction you'll get of what it looked like when Paul came back to Jerusalem. And so that's where we are today. If you drop into Jerusalem today, in fact, I could blindfold you, drop you in there, not tell you where you are, and then as you take the blindfold off and you look where you are in the middle of the old city, you'll see something like this everywhere you go in Jerusalem. It looks like this. And everything is still built out of limestone. So it's a pretty remarkable city. This is in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem. So again, you can blind someone and drop them in there and ask them, where are you? They'll say, oh, I'm in Jerusalem, because that's what it looks like. Kind of cool. Okay, so hold that picture. That's where we start today in Paul's dealings with the Jews. We're in verse 17 of chapter 21. When he had come to Jerusalem, the brothers received us gladly. Yes, received us. So we know that Luke, the author of Acts, is now writing in the first person. So he's with Paul at this point as well. Okay, so everything's hunky-dory, right? Well, 18. On the following day, Paul went with us to James, and all the elders were present. And when we talk about James, we're talking about the half-brother of Jesus. For reasons we don't quite understand totally, James became sort of the facilitator and the central man in charge of the Christian group that was in Jerusalem. It was James, the brother of Jesus. James, the brother of John, is killed pretty early on in the story. So that's why this is James, the brother of Jesus. And it doesn't say the apostles. It says the elders. So James, the brother of Jesus, and the elders. And a lot of people speculate, why doesn't it say, well, James and the apostles? Well, because the apostles probably had already left and they're going all around the world, because at this point in the story, we are 25 years after the resurrection. So the apostles are actually people by name. Apostles means to stand far. It means to go out. So the apostles are probably out spreading the gospel all around the world, like we've been following Paul, like we've been following Peter. A lot of good extra biblical accounts show that Thomas probably went to India. You can go to parts of India to this day and they'll have monuments to Thomas. No kidding. Yes. So anyway, so they did their thing as apostles. So there are probably not too many of them in town right now. It's kind of hard to tell. Okay, so they met with them. And 19, after greeting them, he related one by one the things that God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. So he's sort of given a report. Like when he came back into town, they said, so Paul, what have you been doing? Well, let me tell you what I've been doing. So here's the entire Jesus Tour 3 map. I've shrunk it down, so you got to put your glasses on. The entire Jesus Tour 3 map. And he starts in Antioch, right there, so follow the bouncing ball. There it goes. Oh, wait, go back. There it goes. So he leaves Antioch. He goes across Asia, up to Macedonia, down to Corinth in Greece, to Philippi, back across and down to Jerusalem. And that's where we are today. Big trip. It was a very big trip. Okay, and when they'd heard this, they glorified God. So Paul told stories all about what happened in there. And we've been studying about this third tour for over a month now. All those stories are the 3 years in Ephesus, the 3 months down near Corinth, as he's down there before he comes back home, all the plots, all the violence, all the great responses. So this is what he tells. He tells this entire thing, and they glorified God. They didn't glorify Paul. They glorified God. That's really important. Okay, and I want to show this too. I haven't mentioned this as we've gone, but while he was in Ephesus, remember he was in 3 years in Ephesus. That was about half of the Jesus Tour number 3. He was in Ephesus. While he was there, he decided to write. And he wrote 1 Corinthians and shipped it off to Corinth. Oh, that's kind of, not only that, but he also wrote Romans and sent that off to Rome while he was in Corinth for those 3 months. So in those 3 months he was in Corinth, man, he was writing like a maniac. And then what about 2 Corinthians? Well, 2 Corinthians, while he was up in Macedonia, probably Philippi, he wrote that when he was up in Philippi and sent it down to Corinth. So those 3 were written there. Someone asked, I think it was last week or week before, I misspoke about Ephesus. Ephesus was written much later when Paul makes it into Rome, in his first imprisonment in Rome, which is coming up. Plot spoiler, he gets arrested, goes to Rome. That's when he writes Ephesus and Colossians and some others. But these 3 were written while he was on the road in this third tour. It's interesting, too, because the Corinthian letters were written when Paul was in pretty close face-to-face connection with the Corinth church at the time. So he's writing these on the road as he's there. And remember, he also had mentioned that in this entire tour that his aspiration was to eventually go back to Jerusalem and to make it to Rome. So ahead of him, he writes the magnum opus of Romans that he sends off to Rome. Okay, just wanted to let you know that before he left the map. Okay, after he tells the story, they said to him, "You see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those who have believed, and they're zealous for the law." And by the way, that's not bad. We'll have to separate that as we go along. They're zealous for the law, and they've been told about you that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or walk according to our customs. They're saying this is what they're hearing you're telling the Jews. And this is a problem, actually, and this is going to cause some friction in Jerusalem. As you recall, and we'll get to this in a second, when they sent letters to the Gentiles, what the Gentiles should do, it didn't include circumcision and all that stuff. But the Jews are still doing the law of Moses, and there's nothing wrong about that for the Jews, okay? So anyway, they're hearing that Paul said to the Jews, forsake the laws of Moses, and that's actually a lie. It's a rumor, okay? So he goes on and says, what then is to be done? They will certainly hear that you have come. So he's saying, since they've heard this lie that you're telling the Jews to forsake the law of Moses, it's going to get bad here. It's going to get really bad. So we got to come up with a strategy to deal with this. They will know you're in town. We got to figure something out. So here's their plan. Do therefore what we tell you. What are we going to tell you? Look, we have 4 men who are under a vow probably a Nazirite vow. And if you know about that, there's certain kind of ascetic things they do, including cutting of hair, not cutting of hair, stuff like that. Anyway, these guys are under a vow. Take these men and purify yourself along with them, okay? Join with them, pay their expenses so that they may shave their heads. Okay, you don't understand the Nazirite vow. That's okay. Just understand it's a vow that's connected to Jewish Mishnah thought. And so he says, join with them so you can publicly show you support this. Thus, all will know that there's nothing in what they've been told about you, but that you yourself also live in observance to the law. So if you do this publicly, they'll see that, and they'll understand that you still support the law of Moses. Now, Paul does not support the law of Moses for Gentiles, and that's a longer discussion, and we already saw that back in chapter 15. But in this particular case, it's okay for the Jews. By the way, if you remember, if you turn back, remember when we were over in Greece, and he's coming out of Corinth, and he's getting ready to go on the boat. He goes through Cenchreae, and he cuts his hair in Cenchreae because of a vow. Remember that in Acts 18? That's a similar kind of a thing. So it's a vow, it's an ascetic vow in terms of following God. There's nothing wrong with it. So what they're saying is we can probably take the edge off of the resistance you're going to get to being in town if you just publicly join these guys in doing this vow. Is that okay? And this is not a compromise theologically for Paul. It's fine. But they clarify, just as what you're thinking right now, but as for the Gentiles who have believed, now we're being clear, as for the Gentiles, not the Jews, this is what we've done. We sent a letter with our judgment that they should abstain from what's been sacrificed to idols, and from blood, and from what has been strangled, and from sexual immorality. We read that in Acts 15. Remember, they had this big debate in Jerusalem, and they come on down from Antioch, and they talk about, the basic question is, Gentiles who come to the Jewish Messiah, Jesus, do they need to be circumcised? And then all the rest of the law of Moses. And so what he's reminding them there here is that, no, we told them, Gentiles, no. But there are a few things we recommended, and that's what we recommended. So you have to be clear when we're talking about the law of Moses. Many times as Christians, we think, grace is good and the law of Moses is bad. However, the law of Moses is what Jesus says, not one jot or tittle is going to go away. I'm not here to erase the law. And that's just much a longer discussion. But when it comes to Gentiles, the law of Moses doesn't apply. Okay, so that's what we're getting at right here. Okay, let's move on. I said that in too short a form to probably misunderstand what I just said. But that's kind of it. Okay, so here we go. So kind of to quell the potential conflict, then Paul took the men, these 4 guys, and the next day he purified himself along with them. It's a very public event. And they went into the temple, giving notice when the days of purification would be fulfilled, and the offering presented for each one of them. So they gave the offering, usually burnt offerings. And remember, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9, which he has already written and shipped to Corinth. I just showed you that. He wrote to the Jews, I became as a Jew in order to win Jews. And to those under the law, I became as one under the law, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those under the law. And so he says what I do is I adapt to the situation so that I'll remove all the barriers to talking about who Jesus is. And so as I operate as a Jew, I'll operate as a Jew. What he's saying right here in 1 Corinthians is exactly what he's doing in Acts 21 this morning. He's following this. Okay. So when the 7 days were almost completed, that's the length of completing this vow, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple doing this vow stuff. Wait a second. Jews from Asia? Wait, we're in Jerusalem. We're in Jerusalem. So where are the Jews from Asia? There's Turkey. And Asia, if you remember, is the far left end of Turkey. That's where he just was. That's where Ephesus is. That's where all those villages are. That's what are they doing in town? I mean, how is it that they were in Asia and now they're in Jerusalem and they happen to just kind of coincide with Paul being back in Jerusalem? What's going on? I gave you an assignment a little while ago, and that assignment was, why was Paul so antsy to get back to Jerusalem by Pentecost? Well, we're not exactly sure why. However, that explains, if this is indeed Pentecost, that explains why there's so many people in town. It was a big bunch of people back in town. Remember, when we talk about Pentecost at the beginning of Acts, all these Jews are in town for a Jewish occasion, Pentecost, and that's when Peter and all the guys give their presentation in all those different languages. There's tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people in town for Pentecost. So that explains why, as Paul's doing this vow publicly, so they'll see he supports the law of Moses, as he's doing this vow and it involves being in the temple, it turns out that all these people from where he just was in Ephesus are in town saying, wait a second, what are you doing here? And it causes a stink. It causes a stink, the Jews from Asia. They stirred up the whole crowd and they laid hands on him, crying out, hey, men of Israel, help. This is the man who's teaching everyone everywhere against the people and the law and this place. So, oh my gosh, he's in deep water now. I mean, he tried to do these public vow things in order to tell people, I'm okay with the law of Moses. And then they say, no. He is against three things. He's against the people. That's the Jews. He's against the Jews. That's a lie, actually, because he's a Jew. He's against the law. No, he's not against the law. You just have to understand it properly applied. And he's against this place. The place being the temple. So they're saying, they're actually calling out everyone in town who was there for Pentecost, and it's swollen with Jews. I mean, there's a lot of people there. This guy is not what he appears to be. He's a fraud. We don't care if it looks like he's doing a vow, a Jewish vow. He's a fraud. He's against all of this stuff. He's against our people. He's against our law. He's against this temple. He's against all this kind of stuff. Of course, we know he's not. But that's the hot water he's in as they see him. These Jews from Asia. Moreover, he even brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place. By the way, if you bring a non-Jew into certain parts of the temple, you'll be stoned. You'll be killed. So that's what they're accusing him. They're accusing him of a capital crime. They're accusing him of bringing Greeks in there. Well, now, wait a second. The four guys who are completing their vows that Paul is doing publicly with them, they're not Greek. They're clearly not Greek. So what is this? Is this just a bold-faced lie? A bold-faced lie in order to take Paul down? Well, there's actually a little bit of mistaken identity going on. They had previously seen Trophimus, the Ephesian. Ephesus is in Asia, the Ephesian, with him in the city, and they suppose that Paul had brought him into the temple. Since they were from Asia, probably Ephesus, they recognized Trophimus walking around with Paul in town, and so when they saw Paul going into the temple area, they just kind of presumed Paul was taking Trophimus, a Gentile Greek, into the temple area. Make an assumption, make a mistake. But they're still accusing him of a capital crime because of that misunderstanding. Then all the city was stirred up. Yeah, I mean really stirred up. And we're talking all the city. We're talking all the people who are in town for Pentecost, probably. They're all stirred up, and they ran together. They seized Paul, they dragged him out of the temple, and at once the gates were shut, the gates to the temple. So it's basically, we're taking you out of the temple. Remember how they took Jesus to kill him? They took him out of town. This is the first step in taking someone out to kill him. You take him out of the temple, you shut the gates, so nothing can go in there, and then you take him further out and you kill him. They're in the process of getting ready to kill him. That's what this is. They grabbed him, this huge mass of people. So the Ephesian Jews had their way, and people were all riled up. And as they were seeking to kill him, word came to the tribune of the cohort that all Jerusalem was in confusion. Remember the Antonia fortress with the 4 pillars I showed you? The guy in charge of that entire place. Word comes to him that this is going down. Of course, they're right next to the temple area. They probably could just hear it out their windows. But word comes to them that there's this row going on. And if you've listened to me anything about what the Romans' responsibility in the area was, it was this: you must enforce the order. There must be order. So we don't care who's right, who's wrong. We're not going to go through all that kind of stuff. We just want order. So you take your men out there and you enforce order. Sign Caesar. That's the only thing they had to do. So they hear this disorder and they engage, verse 32. So the tribune immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. Whew. Wow. So suddenly now the entire Temple Mount area and the edges of it are flooded with Roman soldiers who are on red alert. They're on high alert. They got to quell this rebellion before it gets out of hand. So when they saw the tribune and the soldiers, they knew, they stopped beating Paul. Yeah. Beat him. Tribune's here. Oh, hi. Yeah. Order. Again, see, the Romans don't care who's at fault. But if they see someone beating someone else and causing disorder, they're as likely to kill the people who are beating Paul as they are to kill Paul. So everyone basically acts like nothing's going on. It's instant peace. Okay? And then the tribune came up and arrested him, because it looks like he's the problem, and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. And he inquired who he was and what he had done. Which I like that. See, they don't care who's at fault here. Let's get this guy out of the mix, and it'll probably calm down right now. By the way, who are you and what did you do? After you arrest him. Arrest first, ask later. This is how it works to enforce order. Inquires who he was and what he had done. Well, some in the crowd were shouting one thing, "Wah!" and some another thing, "Ah!" and as he could not learn the facts because of the uproar, he ordered him to bring him into the barracks. So when the people hear the tribune asking Paul, who are you and what have you done? The crowd has their opinion, one thing and another thing, and it's just so raucous, the tribune's going, I can't figure this out. So let's go somewhere quiet, let's go in the barracks. By the way, the Jews couldn't go into the barracks because it would defile them. So he knew if he withdrew the barracks, the Jews would stay outside. At least we can get a little peace here and I can find out who this guy is. So that's the tactic. I love megaphones. Okay. And when he came to the steps, so the steps going into the barracks, you saw a picture of it, the Antonia Fortress. He's going up the steps into the barracks. He was actually carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the crowd. It was that bad. It was that bad. They said, here, let's carry you into the barracks. And they lifted him up and they were carrying him out. I'm lifted high. It's a crazy scene. And since Luke is writing this, Luke is probably watching this like, whoa. And they're carrying Paul off and they're marching up the steps into the barrack to get him out of this sea of angry people. For the mob of people followed, crying out, hey, away with him, away with him. More megaphones. I like megaphones. So as they're carrying Paul up high to keep him out of the hands of the crowd saying, yeah, away with him, take care of him, away with him back. That's an idiomatic way of saying kill him, away with him. Okay, I'm just saying, that's what that is right there. Kill him. And they're hoping that the Romans, as they take Paul out, they don't think they're going to take Paul out just to ask him who he is and what he's done. They're hoping they'll take him out and kill him and they'll solve all the problems. Yeah, so that's what everyone's saying. Tension. Well, as Paul was about to be brought into the barracks, I see him kind of like carried on the soldiers' shoulders, and he's like halfway through the door at the top of the steps. He's not quite in yet. As Paul was about to be brought into the barracks, he said to the tribune, may I say something to you? This is classic. This is just classic. May I say something to you? And the tribune says, hey, do you know Greek? He says this to him in Greek. See, Paul's got an option. Paul is probably bilingual. Well, he is bilingual, but he's also possibly trilingual, which means he not only knows Greek because he comes out of an academic background and all that kind of stuff. And Greek was actually the language of the elite, quote unquote, of the time. People who'd gone to college and their equivalent to the time you spoke Greek. Greece really colonized a lot of that world about 2 to 3 centuries earlier, and as a result, not only left their culture, but they left their language. So Greece left Greek all over the place. So if you wanted to talk to anybody, almost like today, if you go anywhere in Europe, you can speak English. Back then, it was Greek. You can speak Greek. So as soon as the tribune, he hears this guy speaking in Greek, he realizes, oh, well, he must be a somebody. By the way, the other languages Paul could speak, probably a little bit of Latin, right, because of the Romans, but most assuredly a version of Hebrew, street Hebrew, that was used in Israel at the time as well. So that was the common language. So he could speak probably all those. Anyway, when he says he hears Greek, he understands that he has a misunderstanding about who Paul is. Well, wait, aren't you the Egyptian, then who recently stirred up a revolt and led the 4,000 men of the assassins out into the wilderness? We know a little bit about this event, not much, but evidently this happened relatively recently in the memory of this guy. So he says, wait a second, I thought you were probably this guy who had this big rebellion with this group called the Assassins. I like that. Yeah. And evidently he was on the loose. So he figured that's what this guy was. But when he realized that Paul spoke Greek, That meant he was refined and could possibly be a citizen. So he's going to have to step carefully here. He's going to have to step carefully. But so you're probably not that guy, right? Well, Paul replies, no, I'm a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no obscure city. Tarsus is a city of academics, is what it is. It kind of like has the same reputation that Boston and Cambridge do today. You'd think higher education. So, well, that was Tarsus, and it's up in Cilicia, which is that sort of under armpity area on the right side of under Turkey, Cilicia. So it's kind of an elite sort of area. So he says, no, I'm a Jew. I'm a Jew, which probably confused this Roman guy big time because, well, wait, aren't the Jews kind of messing with you? I don't understand. So you're a Jew, and you're a trained Jew, and you're from Tarsus in Cilicia. Well, what? And that's not an obscure city. That's a city of big-time stuff. So this conversation, by the way, just for a little humor break, is while Paul's being held up in the air by these soldiers as they're halfway through the door going into the barracks. So, can I talk to you for a second? Yeah. Hey, I thought you were that Egyptian guy. No, I'm a Jew from Tarsus. Oh! I got to make a movie. This is just crazy. So I'm a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no obscure city. And you know what Paul says next? He says, so I demand protection in the name of Caesar. Save me from this mob. No, he doesn't say that. That's what I would say. Because look, there's a sea of angry people below you as you're on the arms of all these Roman soldiers and you're getting ready to go into a safe place. I would say, hey, let's go in there and get away from them. What do you say? We can have this discussion after I get off the shoulders of your soldiers. What do you think? That's what I'd be saying. Get into a safe place. And then we can sit around a cup of tea. We can talk about who I am. We can figure out how we're going to solve this. We can have a nice rational discussion. And it's not what Paul does. What Paul says next, I would never say in a million years. Now, get the picture. He's still being held up by these Roman soldiers. He's got his head through the doorway into the barracks. At his feet and beyond are all the screaming people who want to kill him. They want to kill him. So Paul decides, what a great opportunity. So instead, he says, I beg you, permit me to speak to the people. Are you kidding me? No. Just get out of harm's way? No. You've got all these Roman soldiers, literally hundreds of them, at your beck and call. Just let them take you out and you'll be safe. So while I'm here, can I speak to these people? Permission, please? Mr. Big Guy Roman, can we do that? Now, if I was the Roman guy, I'd say absolutely not. Right? Wouldn't you? No. Why? Well, because if I let him say anything to these crowds, they're already stirred up by what he's done. Who knows what's going to happen if he lets them talk to them? No, absolutely not. We're going in the barracks and we're sitting down and I'm going to find out who you are. That's how you would normally write the story. You know what happens, right? This is just craziness. Well, when he'd given him permission... Really? Oh, yeah. Why not? Okay, when he'd given him permission, Paul, standing now on the steps. He never did get inside the barracks. He's standing at the top of the barrack steps. So he's standing in the steps, motioned with his hand to the people, and when there was a great hush, I don't know how this works. I've tried this and it never works. There was a great hush. He addressed them in the Hebrew language saying, next time we're going to look at that. So you're going to have to wait until next time. Oh, why do you do this? I'm cruel and unusual. Yeah. So, but ask yourself, what would you say to a hostile crowd who's been trying to kill you? Really? Bye. Bye. Yeah. Glad you're with me today. I'll be here all week. Bye. No. What would you say to a hostile crowd that wants to kill you? Really?
It would have to be God-inspired.
It would have to be God-inspired. Thanks, Phyllis, because there's nothing he's going to say to calm them down. I'm sure there's nothing to calm them down. I don't think he's going to get up there with his plan saying, oh, no, you got me wrong. I'm not that Egyptian dude or whoever that was that had the assassins. I'm not that guy. And no, I never took that guy, the Greek guy from Ephesus into the temple. Oh, you got that all wrong. And then the crowd's going, oh, we're sorry. No, it's not going to work. So what do you say? And why did Paul decide to take this moment to do this? And if you recall, when he got into hot water during parts of Jesus' tour, 3 and 2, and a little bit of 1, he decided after the bad things happened, things aren't working out well here, I'm going to go on to the next town. That's what he would do. But here, he's right smack dab in the middle of it and decides to plant his feet on the ground and stay and talk. So, yeah, and it's an interesting circumstance because why wouldn't you take advantage of this opportunity? Because look at what he's got. He's got thousands of people looking at him and listening to him. He's up on an elevated platform. He's on steps. Yeah, and he's got a guard guarding the stage for him. Hundreds of Roman soldiers. So why wouldn't you take advantage of the situation? This is perfect. Now I can say whatever I want to say, and if they want to jump the stage and try and kill me, we've got hundreds of soldiers here who will kill them instead. This is the best thing ever. Let's speak. Yeah. But to have that attitude, you also have to have something of a selfless attitude, like this may actually result in my death. Because look, things could go bad. I mean, he could speak. Remember, the Roman leader, he's taking some risks here, letting Paul speak to them and inflame them further. He could speak, and it could get worse, and people might start dying as the Roman soldiers are killing people, and that will always make things worse, and the crowd could get worse after that. I mean, not just worse for Paul, but worse for the entire order of the situation. I mean, it could get really bad. So bad that the Roman leader would probably say, that's the end of you, and kill him and say, we've solved this. I mean, it could really get out of hand right here. Why the Roman leader would let him do this, I just don't know. It's got to be the Holy Spirit. I mean, I just don't know. But for Paul, it's a perfect situation. It's a perfect situation. So at this point, standing on the stairs, I'm convinced he's silently praying to God, say, God, you've created this stage. What do I say? What do I say to these Jews who are here probably for Pentecost? What are we going to say? And I really don't care if it ends up in my death. Remember, Paul talked about already the fact that he wants to finish his race. This is part of his finishing the race. And so when God puts together the perfect circumstance, he's going to take advantage of it. He's going to speak instead of save his hide. Okay, let's just wrap up and make a few observations. Then we'll go home. Remember I told you about the fact that he wrote Romans, sent it off while he was down there in Greece. We think he was in Corinth, but down that bottom part for sure. I mean, the way he writes Romans, you can tell that's where it came from. So he writes Romans, and if you're familiar with Romans, there's some great passages, but let me just quote you this one from Romans 8. Verse 29, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. And as I read that earlier this week, I was reading through Romans, I realized that this entire scene with Paul coming back into Jerusalem is almost a carbon copy of what happened when Jesus came back to Jerusalem when he was killed. Talk about being conformed to his image. So I just made a list. I made a list of the similarities, and maybe you can make a list. For instance, there's some similarities with what Jesus suffered, what Paul did. If you look at, for instance, prior to coming to Jerusalem. So let me see if you can think of some of them. You know what happened as he was coming back to Jerusalem. And as Jesus was coming back to Jerusalem before that Passion Week, what are some similarities about what happened with Jesus and what happened with Paul as they came to Jerusalem? Can you think of any? The crowds, yeah, there were lots of crowds in town because that was for Passover for Jesus. Yeah, that's one big one. Crowds in town here as well. Nazareth? Oh, Lazarus. Yeah, Lazarus. And how does that apply to this one?
I believe the raising of the dead. Of course, the guy fell out the window.
Oh, the guy that fell out the window. Yeah, just recently up in Troas on his way back. Yeah, guy fell out of the window and he came back to life. Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. I hadn't thought of that. That's good. Yeah. Wayne.
The disciples had told him, don't go.
His disciples said, don't go.
I'm going to kill you then.
Exactly. So he got warned from his friends, Jesus and Paul both. In fact, I counted it 3 times. 3 times he was warned for Paul, 3 times Jesus was warned in terms of what we have recorded. You were going to say?
That's actually what I was going to say, except the difference being that Paul was warned by the prophets, but Jesus told them, I'm going there to die.
Well, and so that's a parallel too.
Right.
Both Jesus and Paul said, I know, but I'm going anyway.
You have to go there.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, EJ.
Be careful that the trouble is coming for you.
Yeah, so he got warnings. Be careful, trouble's coming for you, but he went anyway. Yeah. So I made a couple of my list. The troubles were predicted. Both of them heard they were coming. His followers themselves tried to dissuade him, say, don't go, don't go, don't go, don't go. Also, he was still determined to finish the ministry. Both of them were. So knowing what was in front of them, he went anyway. Paul and Jesus. Interesting. So Paul is the one way back in the beginning of Acts who was holding the coats as they stoned Stephen, and then later on Paul goes off to persecute the followers of Jesus. And here, Paul is the one who's going back into the town, and now he's going to be persecuted, knowing he knows it's going to happen, and he's going to do it anyway. What a change. What a change. But again, this is 25 years after the resurrection. Paul's changed quite a bit. But he's been conformed to the image of his son in so many ways. And then, okay, in the arrest, you see parallels in the arrest?
Parallels?
I mean similarities between Jesus' arrest and Paul's arrest.
The crowd wanted.
The crowd wanted it. What did you say? False accusations. Yeah. Roman garrison.
Day and night. That's different.
Yeah, that's a different day and night. How about the role of the Romans?
The what?
The role of the Romans.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Who did?
peace.
To keep the peace. And that was actually Pilate's motivation as well. Let's keep some peace here. If I give you this guy versus this guy, will it make you happy? It was a peace issue. It wasn't really who was right and who was wrong. What was the source of the accusations?
From the ancient Jews.
From the Jews, in both cases. So in both cases, it wasn't the Romans with Jesus or with Paul who caused this. It was the Jews in both cases. And yet they used the Romans to enforce it in both cases. Yeah, see? So when you start counting it, he's conformed to the image of Jesus right now as he's being, his arrest there. So I wrote a couple of these down. There's more. The arrest was initiated by the Jews. It was not initiated by the Romans. It was the Jews who had the arrest happen. It was also based on false accusations. We brought that up. Also, interestingly enough, the followers were not arrested with him. You would think with Jesus they would arrest the apostles. They didn't. You would think with Paul they would arrest Luke and the other guys that were with him. They didn't. Just the one guy. That's kind of interesting. Also, there was Roman confusion regarding his identity. So the Romans got involved to bring the peace, but they had no clue who Jesus was, and they had no clue who Paul was. And in a sense, from the Roman ethic of keeping order, who cares who they are? But they had no clue. They were clueless about who these guys were. So again, interesting, he's conformed to the image of his son. Just even right now, he's treated just like that. And Jesus himself said, look, if they did this to me, they'll do this to you. And we're seeing it in living color right here in Acts 21. I mean, exactly how they treated Jesus 25 years before. Exactly. That's how they're treating him. Well, this got me thinking about more parts in Romans, about the similarities with Jesus. And the fact that Paul has actually, over these 25 years, undergone a mindset change. It's a metanoia thing, Michael. It's a mindset change. And the mindset change is what I call the divine exchange. Where basically, Paul has made the decision, if this ends in my death, that's okay because I have to finish this, and I'm on to better things with Jesus after I die anyway. That's the exchange part. And you hear this in Paul's speaking all the time. Dorothy read some from Philippians this morning about that, where Paul's saying basically, this place is pretty good, and there's good things going on here, but you know what? I'm ready to leave because after this, the best is yet to be. It doesn't mean that life is really bad right now. There's ups and downs in life, and you can enjoy the presence of God right now, but there's more to come after that. So what Paul is doing right here is he's making this divine exchange. I'm going to exchange probably the length of my lifetime right here. This could lead to shortening my lifetime significantly, but that's okay. If I shorten my lifetime, I've already made the exchange. I want more of Jesus, and that's probably going to come more after death anyway. So that's the divine exchange. You see him do this all the time. Let me just quote you a couple places. Again, in Romans 8, that same chapter. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs. An heir gets the stuff after death. Okay? Then heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified with him. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. You see the exchange? I mean, it's there right there in black and white. And he wrote this just weeks prior when he was down in Greece, and he wrote this letter to Rome. I don't think he even understood. Maybe he had an inkling that this was going to happen when he got to Jerusalem. But this is exactly the exchange deal he made with God, and it's happening right there when he gets to Jerusalem. That's Romans 8:18. Romans 8, by the way, when you read Romans, is kind of like a peak of a mountain in Romans. It's like he's building his way up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And he gets to 8. And he finally mentions the Spirit in chapter 8. He doesn't up to that point. And in 8, I mean, it's like a crescendo in a great symphony. And it doesn't mean it goes bad after that, but he sort of supports where he got to when he got to 8 as he moves toward 15 and covers a lot of other topics. But 8 really is just an astonishing chapter. Let me give you another piece of Romans 8. Further down the chapter 35. So who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Rhetorical question. Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness, or danger, or sword? Anything? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone? I mean, it's a rhetorical question. It's like the answer to all these things is nothing, Ken, right? So in case you didn't catch his rhetorical question, 38, I'm sure that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord.
It's only ourselves that can do that.
The divine exchange. The divine exchange. You know, give me Jesus. We sang that this morning, and that's the whole idea. For Paul, it's all about who Jesus is and getting more of Jesus. And in another place, I won't quote for you, Paul says, you know, I'm kind of torn. You know, I could die, I could stay, I could die, I could stay. If I die, that's more of Jesus. Woohoo, that's great. If I stay, well, then, you know, there's still Jesus, but it's benefits to you. So, okay, I'll stay. The divine exchange is constantly in his thinking. But preeminent in the divine exchange is not the selfish idea of how do I get more Jesus. The idea is, but I want to serve Jesus well to the end. I want to finish the course. And so as he's at the top of the stairs, on the shoulders of these shoulders, he says, well, here's another chance. Can I talk to my people? And the guy says, sure. And then one more later, when he's in prison in Rome, he writes to the Colossian Church. By the way, Colossae we saw Ephesus before many times. If you just go inland from Ephesus, about 100 miles, you'll get to Colossae. That's where it was. It's in the center of Asia. Colossians 1:24. Now I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake. And in my flesh, I'm filling up what is lacking in Christ's afflictions for the sake of his body, that is the church. So I'm suffering in the same way that Jesus would have suffered. That's his way of saying I'm filling up what Jesus couldn't be here physically to suffer. I'm suffering on his behalf because the benefit is to you. And that's why I do this. He's finishing the course. And it doesn't matter whether it's getting tough, and it doesn't matter if the tribulation is coming, because he's already made the divine exchange. And nothing can separate him from the love of Christ. So we're good. So let's just push forward in the midst of all this kind of stuff. Okay. That's why that's what we're going to sing in the end. Because for Paul, the divine exchange was give me Jesus. And if indeed that leads to tribulation and problems and trials, well, I want to finish well. And I want these people who are gathered here to kill me today, he's thinking, I want them to have an opportunity to find Jesus. It's another thing that we seldom do when our enemies are out to kill us, is to say, I need to pause here for a second in a moment of vulnerability so I can give them an opportunity to find what in God's grace he's given to me. Do you pray that for your enemies? Sorry, I don't either. But I want to be able to. But it comes such in clear contrast when I see Paul standing on those steps and I see those people snarling like dogs, wanting him to be dead. And he, at that moment, asks this Roman leader, I need to talk to these people. And he does. It's a challenge to me as well when you and I both get into conversations of rising conflict. You can feel it coming. If I continue this conversation, this is going to go into kind of contentious areas. I don't know if I want to do this. And at that point, internally, your mind's saying, fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight. Should I stay here and let this keep going? And can I bring Jesus into this conversation? Because I know it's going to get uncomfortable in a second here. Or should I just run away? Run away! And I run away. Well, there's a point at which I need to come back and say, but Jesus, you know what? Even though in the next couple moments I have enough common sense to know this is going to get contentious, but I think this is an opportunity for this person who needs you to hear about you. So I don't want to be in the conflict for conflict's sake, but I also don't want to run away for conflict's sake. I want to just speak the truth in love, as Paul writes to Ephesus later on. You need to speak the truth in love. Not just speak the truth without the love, because that's kind of abusive. And not just be loving, but not speak the truth, because that's sort of condescending. That's silly. You need to speak the truth and speak it in love, even though you may be in sort of a hot water situation. And the next time you feel like you're in a hot water situation where you want to talk about Jesus, think about standing on the steps to the Antonia Fortress with snarling people at your feet. And say, well, gosh, this isn't as bad as what Paul had. I guess I can talk about Jesus. Because that's where I go every time I think about that. You can tell when you're getting close to a conflict area talking about spiritual things. You can feel it coming. And you have enough common sense to know if I sort of sidestep my way right now and kind of get out of this, we won't have this conflict. Be like a crab. Run sideways as fast as possible. No, you can actually speak about who Jesus is in wonderfully winsome ways, even though you know it's probably not going to be immediately received with candor and thanksgiving. Because Jesus said, I didn't come to bring peace. I quoted this to some this week. I didn't come to bring peace. Wait a second, isn't that Christmas thing, peace on earth, goodwill toward man? I mean, what about the peace thing? Didn't Jesus come to bring peace? Okay, we need to read that a little bit more carefully. However, Jesus said, I didn't come to bring peace. In fact, in my coming, I'm going to separate families. Fathers against sons, mothers against daughters. I mean, they're going to fight. Because who I am and the challenge of who I am as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords is not going to roll easily in a lot of people's lives who want to be their own kings. And that's why they killed him. And that's why when you speak of Jesus, there'll be resistance. However, there are people who are waiting for a little inkling of light of hope. Is there a reason for life? Is there anyone who truly loves me? Is there anyone who accepts me exactly the way I am, rather than for who they think I am? Is there anyone who looks to me and wants to give life to me? And then you can say, I'm glad you asked. Jesus does. Can I tell you how he's done that for me? I mean, it's really that simple. Some people are waiting to hear. So don't let the threat of the snarls scare you away. Give me Jesus. Father, we thank you for this amazing passage. We thank you for leading Paul through your Spirit into these situations, these crazy situations. And how just in his very simple actions, he illustrates to us a heart that's been radically changed in love toward you and is willing to finish the race you've called him to for the purposes that others might also come to understand who you are. Lord, I pray in the ordinary circumstances that we find ourselves that you would give us your courage through your Spirit to, in lesser contentious circumstances, speak the simple and loving truth of who Jesus is in such circumstances that appear like they're just going to go south, that they're just going to be contentious. But Lord, we don't know the hearts that you've been preparing. We don't know the people who hunger and thirst for righteousness. We don't know the people who are despondent because of the degree of saturation of sin in their life that brings death. Lord, we don't know whether the one in front of us is the one who sits in darkness and the shadow of death. So, Lord, give us that confidence to know that you lead us in divine appointments to people that we run up against. And we pray that you would speak the simple truth of your grace and love toward us as your Spirit resides in us. So thanks for this passage. It encourages us greatly. Thanks in Jesus' name. Amen.